I've combed through 4 hours of content for the House Financial Services Committee holding on the FTX collapse, so you don't have to. First, we're going to begin with the opening statement from Ms. Waters.
I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to give an opening statement. First, I'd like to welcome Mr. John Ray III, who has been appointed CEO of FTX to oversee its bankruptcy, to testify before our committee for the first part of our investigation into the fall of FTX. I am hopeful that the arrest of Mr. Bankman Fried, the founder and former CEO of FTX, means he will be held accountable for the fraud he has committed and the harm he has caused. He was scheduled to testify under oath before this committee today. Unfortunately, the timing of his arrest denies the public the opportunity to get the answers they deserve. Rest assured that this committee will not stop until we uncover the full truth behind the collapse of FTX. Just a few months ago, FTX was one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges in the world, with a valuation of $32 billion in just 3 years since its founding. Today, FTX is bankrupt and possibly looted. FTX misused an approximately $10 billion in customer funds and owes creditors at least $3 billion. Today, as many as 1 million people, many of whom are here in the United States, are locked out of their FTX accounts and may recover only a fraction of their hard-earned investments, if any at all. But this failure is not just noteworthy for its size, but for the company's total disregard for standard business practices, governance, risk management, and criminal conduct. Mr. Ray, who also oversaw one of the largest corporate bankruptcies in United States history, Enron, declared that he had never in his career seen such, and I quote, complete failure of corporate controls and such a complete absence of trustworthy financial information as occurred here.
Mr. McHenry has some great points about crypto and seems to have a good understanding of the underlying technology.
We have to separate out the bad actions of an individual from the good created by an industry and an innovation. So let me be clear. I believe in the promise of digital assets and those around the world building on blockchain technologies. And that's why I've worked and will continue to work to provide clear rules of the road for the digital asset ecosystem here in the United States. And that's how we protect American consumers and investors in this marketplace and allow innovation to occur here in the United States. I'll finish with this. We know the Securities Exchange Commission Chair Gensler's regulation by enforcement approach is not going to stop bad actors. Next year, I look forward to hearing from Mr. Gensler early and often.
The FTX Group's collapse appears to stem from absolute concentration of control in the hands of a small group of grossly inexperienced and unsophisticated individuals. We know the following. First, customer assets at FTX.com were commingled with assets from the Alameda trading platform. That much is clear. Second, Alameda used client funds to engage in margin trading, which exposed customer funds to massive losses. Third, the FTX Group went on a spending binge in 2021 and 2022, during which $5 billion was spent on a myriad of businesses and investments, many of which may only be worth a fraction of what was paid for them. Fourth, loans and other payments were made to insiders in excess of $1.5 billion. Fifth, Alameda's business model as a market maker required funds to be deployed to various third-party exchanges, which were inherently unsafe and further exacerbated by the limited protections offered in certain of those foreign jurisdictions. The loans that were given to Mr. Bankman Fried were not just one loan, it was numerous loans, some of which were documented by individual promissory notes. There's no description of what the purpose of the loan was. In one instance, he signed both as the issuer of the loan as well as the recipient of the loan. But we have no information at this time as to what the purpose or the use of those funds were, and that is part of our investigation. There were virtually no internal controls and no separateness whatsoever.
Mrs. Wagner brings up some important comparisons to the Enron case.
Ray, you have compared FTX as worse than Enron. Mr. Ray, you have compared FTX as worse than Enron. Can you please elaborate on some of the specific ways FTX is worse than one of the largest corporate frauds in history?
The FTX group is unusual in the sense that, I've done probably a dozen large, scale bankruptcies over my career, including Enron, of course. Every one of those entities had some financial problem or another. They have some characteristics that are in common. This one is unusual, and it's unusual in the sense that literally, there's no record keeping whatsoever. It's in the absence of record keeping. Employees would communicate, invoicing and expenses on Slack, which is, essentially a way of communicating for chat rooms. They use QuickBooks, a multi-billion-dollar company using QuickBooks.
QuickBooks?
QuickBooks. Nothing against QuickBooks, it's a very nice tool, just not for a multi-billion-dollar company. There's no independent board, right? We had one person really controlling this, no independent board. That's highly unusual in a size company this is. And it's made all more complex because we're not dealing with, widgets or, or something that's tangible. We're dealing with crypto. And the technological issues are made worse when you're dealing with an asset such as crypto.
Reports suggest that FTX.com transferred more than half of its customer funds, roughly $10 billion, to Alameda Research. Is that accurate, sir?
Our work is not done. We don't have exact numbers for you today, but I will say it's several $billion in that range. So we know that the size of the harm was significant.
Mr. Ray, FTX.com held itself out as having a sophisticated risk management system commensurate with the size of its operations. You've touched on this a little bit. Based on your work to date, is this accurate? And can you explain the, quote, sophistication of its risk management system?
I can say that's absolutely false. There was no sophistication whatsoever. There was an absence of any management.
Now we're going to hear from Mr. Sherman, which clearly has an ulterior motive for an anti-crypto campaign. Let's listen to this clown try to fumble through how he's picking apart the crypto industry.
For 5 years, I've been trying to ban American investments in crypto. I'm the only member of the House to get an F from the only crypto-promoting organization that rates members of Congress. My fear is that we'll view Sam Bankman Fried as just one big snake in a crypto Garden of Eden. The fact is, crypto is a garden of snakes. Now, from the outside, crypto just looks like a non-fungible token, an electronic pet rock for the 21st century, something that might be good to invest in even though it has no apparent value because you might get somebody else to buy it from you for even more. But in reality, the hope of crypto is to be a currency, to compete with the US dollar, and to announce its advantage over the US dollar in that competition. It puts the advantage right in the name. Crypto, hidden currency. Well, is there a big market for that? Is there a big advantage that crypto has over the US dollar if it actually became a currency, which it's not yet? Well, there are drug dealers, human traffickers, sanctions evaders who will find that to be a good feature. And as Sam Bankman Fried would tell you, there's a hell of a market for bankruptcy court evasion. But the big market is tax evasion. And I know there are some on the other side who cheer every time a billionaire escapes taxes. The other announced purpose of crypto is to compete with the US dollar as a world reserve currency. thereby enriching the corporate billionaire bros and taking thousands of dollars of advantage away from every American family, because we benefit from being a reserve currency. Now, Sam Bankman Fried, or should I say inmate 14372, had one purpose in all of his efforts here in Congress. Was a well-known figure, only one wearing shorts. His one purpose was to keep the SEC out of crypto, to provide a patina of regulation, baby regulation from the CFTC. And I'll have one comment from my colleagues. Don't trash Sam Bankman Fried and then pass his bill.
And a lot of people have been hurt. And aside from the civil actions, I think that we have to send a message.
Have you read the full testimony that was planned by our missing guest?
I have not read his full testimony. Some pieces of it have been relayed to me, but I have not read it. I've not read one word of it, actually.
Yeah, I don't know him personally and probably don't want to, but his testimony is so disrespectful. I mean, there's not a person up here who would like to show this to their children in line 2 of this missive. He says, and I quote, "I would like to start out by formally stating under oath." You can't say it. And I can't even say it publicly. The next 2 words, absolutely insulting. This is the Congress of the United States. And I'd like to submit this, Madam Chair, for the record. I wonder if you would support a resolution that I've been thinking about introducing, changing the name of cryptocurrency to creepy dough currency. I'm going to discuss this with my colleagues. I think it's an appropriate name. I just wanted to know whether you would support changing it to creepy dough.
I'll leave that skill set to the committee.
And how long do we think this is really going to take?
Do you know when the Madoff bankruptcy was filed?
Probably circa 2008, I guess. I don't
So
recall
say
exactly.
2008. And do you know they just made a distribution out of that bankruptcy last week?
That's what I understand, yes.
So that's, what, 14 years? How
Yes.
old are you?
Is that a permitted question?
Because I want you to add 100 to whatever your age is when you finally untangle all of this.
You know, Enron was is a really a different company. The crimes that were committed there were highly orchestrated financial machinations by highly sophisticated people to keep transactions off balance sheets. This is really old-fashioned embezzlement. This is just taking money from customers and using it for your own purpose. Not sophisticated at all. Sophisticated perhaps in the way they were able to sort of hide it from people, frankly, right in front of their eyes. But this isn't sophisticated whatsoever. This is just plain old embezzlement.
Fried has some interesting ideas on how he can stay relevant in the FTX world, and even after stealing customers' money and driving the company into bankruptcy. And I have read that he wants to be retained as an outside consultant, and been very critical of your own appointment, quite frankly, into this position. So after his arrest last night, all of his wishes seem even more unlikely. So what role, if any, should he play in FTX moving forward?
The role he's currently playing. Okay. 0.
Good.
And in looking at the bankruptcy filing, Prager Metis was the audit firm for the .com silo. Their website says they're the first ever CPA firm in the metaverse. So looking at their website, they have 24 offices, 600 staff, 100 partners, principally California, New York, and New Jersey. You stated you're not familiar with Prager Metis, is that correct?
That's correct.
Are they cooperating with in your role as bankruptcy trustee?
We're reaching out to, both firms, audit firms, as well as the firm that does our taxes, and we certainly have tools available if they don't cooperate, but everyone seems to be cooperating at this point.
And are they, you anticipate they'll actively participate in the forensic accounting work you're doing with Ernst & Young?
Absolutely not. No, we are taking information that we get from the prior auditors and accountants and tax professionals, and then we're going to take our investigation from there on an independent basis.
I have a newfound respect for Tom Emmer, and look how he deduces the root of the problem being the centralization of FTX.
Mr. Ray, there were over 100 corporate entities within FTX Group. Some had boards of directors and others did not. Was there a group-level board of directors overseeing the entirety of FTX?
No, there was not.
Would you agree that it's a bad decision for a complex firm like FTX to not have a top-level board of directors?
Yes.
Do you have concerns about the concentration of power in a small group of inexperienced individuals with no oversight?
Yes.
Did FTX.com have basic corporate functions like an accounting or human resource department?
No.
Was there a legal department at FTX.com?
Yes, there was.
Was there a compliance department?
There were people with titles.
Fair enough. And thank you. Finally, to assist the committee's investigation, would you agree that a financial firm the size of FTX needs accounting, human resources, legal, compliance, and risk departments to help prevent something like this from happening?
Absolutely.
We know that Chair Gensler had more meetings with FTX than anyone else in the crypto industry. We understand that what was being negotiated was a framework for digital asset exchange registration and token registration with the SEC that would benefit both parties. It would expand the SEC's jurisdiction in exchange for the SEC's preferential treatment of FTX over other industry participants. We understand there was a lot of activity to move this idea forward, including the circulation of draft short-form disclosures that would enable filers to get tokens listed on this newly formed bespoke exchange. Mr. Ray, I know you're handicapped with the information you currently have obtained, but Chair Gensler refuses to answer our questions or testify before this committee. Will you commit to sharing with this committee any internal documents you come across regarding communication between FTX and Mr. Gensler or others at the SEC?
We'll fully cooperate, with the committee and the regulatory authorities with respect to our investigation.
Again, specifically, I just want copies, that this committee will want copies of those communications to the extent they exist.
We can certainly work with your staff to get you what you need.
Thank you. And Mr. Ray, I appreciate you mentioning your concerns in the beginning of my questioning about the concentration of power in a small group of individuals with no oversight. That is the exact problem that open and permissionless technology like crypto and blockchain solve. It solves for the problems of centralization. You stated in your testimony that you've never seen such a, quote, utter failure of corporate controls at every level of an organization, from the lack of financial statements to a complete failure of any internal controls or governance whatsoever, close quote. FTX had disastrous or even non-existent systems for accounting, audit, cash management, cybersecurity, human resources, risk management, and other unacceptable management practices that currently make your job to uncover the facts quite difficult. Fortunately, the immutable characteristics of public blockchains that some people would care not to understand in this committee allowed the crypto community to reveal Sam Bankman Fried's fraud, and the on-chain public record will assist law enforcement moving forward. I encourage my colleagues to understand Sam Bankman Fried's con for what it is: a failure of centralization, a failure of business ethics, and a crime. It is not a failure of technology. I've worked across the aisle since I came to Congress, so the future of crypto reflects American values, the same way the internet does today. For the most engaged members of Congress on crypto policy, the FTX collapse reminds us of why we care so deeply about this technology: Decentralization is the point.
Mr. Steele brings up some really good points of his cooperation with the Bahamian authorities.
You have stated unauthorized access to certain assets occurred and that the company was in touch with law enforcement officials and regulators. Have you determined whether, in fact, assets were moved out after the bankruptcy?
Yes, clearly there was assets moved out after the bankruptcy.
And do you know whether or not that was an actual hack, or was this done, as has been reported, at the direction of the Bahamian authorities?
It was both.
It was both. And so some was done, some was done as a result of a hack, some was done as a result of the request of the Bahamian authorities.
Yes, that's right.
And do you have indication as to why the Bahamian authorities made that request?
Well, it wasn't a request. They just took it.
The Bahamian authorities took the funds that were at FTX
Yes.
through their own action. Was no action required by FTX employees? Maybe you could provide just a little color.
They were aided by the ex-employees, yes.
They were aided by former employees
Yes,
of FTX.
Yes, Mr. Wang and Mr. Fried.
And now AOC is going to bring some really interesting points about the timeline of these events leading up to the arrest itself.
I want to put together a little bit of a timeline of this collapse between November 12th and yesterday. On November 2nd, we have CoinDesk leaking these balance sheets. On the 8th, Binance signs a non-binding letter to acquire FTX, and Bankman Fried freezes or pauses withdrawals from FTX. I would like to submit to the record your declaration to the U.S. Bankruptcy Court, or FTX's declaration to the U.S. Bankruptcy Court that was filed yesterday. Now, on November 9th, the day after those assets were frozen, Binance announced it would not go through with the purchase, and according to this filing, the same day, Bankman Fried emailed the Bahamian Attorney General with an offer. That offer stated that he would offer to unfreeze withdrawals just for Bahamian customers on FTX, quote, so they can tomorrow fully withdraw all their assets. Correct. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, on November 10th, FTX DM, the next day, was placed into a foreign provisional liquidation in the Bahamas, correct?
Correct.
The next morning. Now, after that, Bankman Fried then made good on his offer, on his previous day's offer, in that email to the Bahamian AG, opening withdrawals just in the Bahamas for a period of 25.5 hours. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, during that period, $100 million was withdrawn in the Bahamas from FTX by 1,500 individuals, correct?
Correct.
And this was the day before you were set to take over. So he was still in control. This was like right before he was supposed to hand this off. Now, I think what we have here is that, or rather afterwards, on November 12th, we have what Congresswoman Dean was just asking about with this additional minting, these questions around this additional minting. And then on November 16th, the Bahamian appointed joint provisional liquidators did something very interesting. They came here to the United States Bankruptcy Court and sought an entry to recognize the Bahamian liquidation as the main foreign proceeding. Would that additional control be of any potential value to Mr. Bankman Fried for that Bahamian proceeding to be the main one?
Well, clearly, there seemed to be an effort by the Bahamian Commission to get control of the bankruptcy process, and I think that was evident by their filing, which, by the way, was made up in New York, not Delaware.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that correction. I'd like to dig into a little bit of the timeline of yesterday. Yesterday, you filed that same declaration that revealed some of this explosive information. What time did you file this?
That was late.
Around what time?
Yeah, 3 or 4 o'clock.
Around 3 or 4 o'clock. Now, when you file this information, that essentially discloses that you are sharing this information, and it discloses that to opposing counsel, correct?
Yes, we docket it, and the world knows about it.
Now, if opposing counsel essentially becomes notified of this, that would mean that Bankman Fried and potentially Bahamian officials would have been potentially privy to that information starting around 3 or 4 p.m., correct?
Correct.
What time was Mr. Bankman Fried arrested yesterday?
I believe it was in the early evening hours, after 4 o'clock.
About, I believe it was
7
around.
o'clock, perhaps.
It was in the evening, after that filing.
6, 7 o'clock, yes.
I would like to submit to the record the statement from the Attorney General of the Bahamas issued yesterday on the arrest of Mr. Samuel Bankman Fried. And after submitting that to the record, I would like to note that in this statement, they stated at such time as a formal request for extradition is made, presumably by the Southern District of New York, but they do not state when that request for extradition was made. Do you believe that information is important for us to understand in order to piece together a timeline, Mr. Ray?
Yes, sir. I certainly don't have that full timeline, and that's something that we look forward to learning.
Thank you very much.